And I mentioned very briefly there the James Dean car. There's a lot of stories about that. But certainly the story of Alec Guinness wouldn't ride in it. That one is absolutely verified.
So I'm thinking,
Sure, yeah.
What was the name of the ship that they see, the teaser?
The teaser, yep, there's a common one, yeah.
That would fall in that category? Or is that, or...
Teaser's an interesting one up in the strait there towards Pictou. That, is it the ghost of the ship or the men on the ship or what? Yeah, yeah. It is an interesting thing though that you can see the whole crew. Many people have said they could see the crew on the teaser. And that's an interesting thing. The world of the paranormal seems to be a little sexist that way, that you'll get stories. I mean, we had the one of the lone pirate, but you only have to read Blue Nose Ghost or Blue Nose Magic or Mary Fraser's wonderful book, Folklore, Nova Scotia from 1932. All kinds of stories about jolly pirate ghosts guarding treasure, you know, in great camaraderie and brotherhood into the eternity. Women always seem to be alone.
Or crazy.
Or crazy, yeah. So, you know, it does seem that the folklore of the paranormal, it's just the way it is, yeah. You see all the men on the teaser, they're all together. But you very seldom see, there's only one, I believe, in all of Nova Scotia folklore, you know, older folklore stories. That's down by Yarmouth, where there are two women who I believe are school teachers. Who appear together. It's very unusual. You'll see a female ghost reported with a child is quite common, but very seldom you'll get a group of women. But yeah, whether the teaser would be a haunted object or ghost of an object, yeah, it's a hard one to say. Certainly, did paranormal activity rise in the COVID pandemic, or did people just actually have time to slow down, which I haven't been able to do for the last 6 months, I'm hoping to do now, and actually tune into their surroundings. But during the lockdowns, an enormous number of people started reporting paranormal activity in their homes. And I think it was more because, like the old people, we say, well, the old people weren't very sophisticated. They're not like us, you know, we're so clever. I think it's more that the old people weren't so hurried. They had time to tune into their surroundings. An example of vibes soaking into a building. I knew an old parish priest. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. When he did a home visit, he could just feel the vibe of a house. Is it a happy home, a sad home, a violent home? And he would just ask, you know, he said that once, is your husband always very good? And the lady would just break down in tears, you know, things like that. He could just read the vibes of a property. And an example of that was once again in Porcupine Hill area. A lady moved into a house that was fairly new, and everything was fine. She was settling in, and she heard this very cheerful voice say, well, hello there. And she looked around and just assumed it was a friendly neighbor who, you know, came in to visit, and there was nobody there. Happened a couple more times, only to find out that the wood that was used on the wall of the house, only built in the mid-century, came from an old house from the Halifax waterfront area. And maybe some of this rather cheerful old lady's vibe got into the wood. We don't know. Gradually, everything sort of, you know, the manifestations just, you know, calm down with time. We can't leave New Ross without talking about the building known as the Pig and Whistle. We all know that one who live here. It's a building just about half a mile down the road for you folks from away. People lived there perfectly uneventfully, some of them, and other people claim that they had activity of a psychic nature happening there. But the owners that have it today, many of us have noticed, they started to renovate it, and then nothing's happened. Well, I was told by somebody that they actually have so much paranormal activity, things being moved, things being thrown. They are quite scared of the place. They actually brought in somebody who claimed to be a medium, and this guy said he'd never been anywhere like this. He felt that the renovations may have actually precipitated some of this, but in other cases, like in Curzon Place, where Cass Elliot and Keith Moon died, renovations had the opposite effect. There's just no way of knowing. But you can't leave New Ross Ghosts without that. And I mentioned earlier, can ghosts be proven by photography? No. By the way, that's a wonderful, spooky-looking old property. I photographed that house many a time. Never had any psychic manifestations there. I just love photographing old homes. And actually, it had a very happy history until the old people went into a nursing home, and it's fallen down now. Can I tell if my experience is objectively real? A couple of things I advise to people. I mean, I don't go out looking for actual physical ghosts, and I recommend people don't. But first you rule out the physical, then rule out the psychological, and only after that you start to consider the paranormal or the psychic. The physical, of course, are you sick? Are you having a fever? People can see all kinds of things if they're having a fever. The psychological, obviously, if you're under a great deal of stress, either good or bad, you might be hoping for a job interview, or grieving for somebody. Once again, that can. Your mind may be playing tricks on you in a case like that. Obviously, alcohol or drugs are an obvious major red flag. And you see a parallel focus trick. If you see something you think is an apparition, you're probably going to be a bit shaky, so be very careful. But if you just put your hand on your eye like that and pull it up, you'll see double, like an alcoholic does. Their ocular muscles have relaxed, so they see two people. That's what happens. If you see two of the apparition, it's not a hallucination. It's a very quick rule of thumb that works. Sometimes I believe people are schizophrenic, like the late Dr. John Nash, a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician. He was a brilliant professor at Princeton, but he would see people who weren't there, and that was one of the things that can sometimes work with that kind of situation. But as I said, you might be a little rattled, so do it carefully. Don't poke your eyeball. And just to wind up here, we talked about photograph ghosts. Before you look at ghost photographs, you've got to consider one other thing that we can do, and that's called pareidolia. And that's the ability to see what looks like a human face in either, in this case, potatoes, a tree trunk, a handbag, a teapot, a church, and an auto-electric connection, some fruit. Evolutionary biologists believe that it's part of the human condition for a newborn baby to look for a mother's face to nurse when their vision isn't very well focused. Makes sense to me. You can also have auditory pareidolia. If you're in a house, especially if you're very frightened, don't forget your ears are probably quivering a bit. And just perfectly normal sounds can sound like people talking. That's auditory pareidolia. So you have to consider that. But here's an example, and if you guys want to see these more close up, feel free to come to the computer after. Brown Cottage in Quaco, New Brunswick, which some cottage, big cottage, near St. Martin's. And this was actually taken by a dear friend who has a summer home there. And some idiots tried to burn it down. And my friend took this photo of what seems to be, and I'm sorry I can't zoom in better, feel free to come up later, but it does look a bit like a human, actually even on this screen it looks even more so, like a human face there looking out. Yeah, that's the burn marks from where some dingalings tried to burn this building down. The house has a notorious reputation for the paranormal. Is it a real thing? Is it a pareidolia? We're just looking at images that the digital lens is picking up. Or is it something like a pie plate that some practical joker hung there? It's hard to say. A perfect example of a pareidolia. This one makes its rounds on the internet, the Martian ghost. It's real. There's nothing fake about the photograph. It's perfectly legit, taken by one of the rovers. And there's this little tiny figure here, which, if it blown up, does appear rather like a lady with very exposed breasts in a black dress looking over the Martian landscape. Two problems is she'd only be about 5 inches tall if she were a real ghost. She's very, very small. And the cameras actually shoot at about 3 frames per second. I've seen the footage. It's just sand blowing in front of the screen. When you see the frames before and after, there's nothing. But it will make the rounds. You'll see people, this is a genuine, unedited picture. And it is, but it's not a ghost. He believes this one's real, of this house. You can see the phantom lady with the baby. He's absolutely convinced it's not staged or double exposure. Personally, I don't believe it. And the reason I don't is I think it's just too perfect. It's just too well done. It's just too well staged. Maybe it's real.
Is there a child?
Yep, there's a little child next to the lady. And maybe it's real, but for me, yeah, my problem with that one is it's a little too perfect. The brown lady of Raynham Hall, you can't go without thinking of her. She was photographed in 1932 in, well, you just say Raynham Hall in England, by 2 photographers for a very respectable magazine called Country Life. And they claimed that they just saw the apparition on the stairs. Certainly the stories of her have been around since the 1700s. She was allegedly the spirit of the former Walpole, the former Prime Minister. Anyway, They snapped that. That's the original photo there. Right up into the 1970s, I remember showing my age reading about her in the 70s, and they said Kodak Photo Labs could not find any evidence of tampering. But they had the same thing happen with the famous picture of the little girls with the fairies. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle of the Sherlock Holmes books absolutely believed that this picture of the little girls with the fairies was real. Well, digital technology took it right out. You could actually see in the digital enhancements, you could see the strings. They were just a couple of kids playing with a camera. Raynham Hall has been digitally manipulated, and some people believe they may have projected the image of a Marian statue or something that onto the lens. The reason I don't really buy that one, even though it's feasible, is that they were paid by Country Life, a very stodgy and extremely conservative English magazine that did not deal with paranormal pictures or anything like that. And these guys were on paid time. The jury's still out on that one. Is it legitimate or not? Come on, wiki. Interestingly, this house here, remember I talked about Philip Hale, who died in a Jimmy Page-owned home in the 70s. That's Plumpton Place. No longer, sadly, it's no longer open to the public. That was actually owned by the owner of that magazine, Country Life, in the 1930s when the brown lady was photographed. Everything seems to go around. Here's a fake one. This one makes its round on the internet. Allegedly, this upside-down figure just magically appeared on the picture of the ladies with the little girls. You'll see all kinds of stuff to absolutely assure you that it's real. Well, it's absolutely fake. It was made up in about 2009. It makes its rounds on the internet. But we're going to finish with this one. This one, personally, I take more seriously. It was a police photograph of a fatal car accident in the early 80s. 4 young people tragically slid on the snow in St. Louis, and the officer took a police record photograph. Now, it's a little blurry. Possibly he was slipping on the snow, or possibly the flash was delayed and his heartbeat shook the camera, which can certainly happen. He didn't think any more of it until there was the one fatality was a young fellow in the front. The other 3 survived. The police photograph lab, the photo development lab, called him up a couple of weeks later and said, "You better look at this." And there seems to be the face of the young fella, almost as if he's screaming "no" over the top of the car. And the interesting thing is that also you've got like the bottom of the chin and the top of the chin. Like everything else, it doubles up. Nobody's ever been able to really debunk that one. There are people who say, well, I'm not going to believe it, and that's fine. Nobody says you have to. But family and friends, not only did they see that they recognized him, they recognized his haircut and even the facial expressions, but they felt, and you might want to see that closer on the computer, they saw what looks to be his dog. You can just see the 2 eyes there and what seems to be the head of a chocolate lab. And folks who looked at it said, oh, that was his dog. The dog died of old age a couple of years. He was about 19 when he died. His dog died of old age when he was about 17. And maybe there's a little bit of a comfort there that perhaps the dog was there to help him his beloved dog came to help him into the next life. And on that kind of vein, just to finish up here, getting back to New Ross, I've got a neighbor up the road. She's seen several things in her life. Her father-in-law going out to the outhouse the day after he died, who I knew very well. He was a great old guy. She called me up one day to say what she used to call him my yellow dog. He was a sort of lab-type dog. He got loose again. He's on your front doorstep. Well, he died the night before. So it was, to me, I find that kind of reassuring, that the idea that dogs do indeed have souls. And I think perhaps that's why ghosts appeal to us, is that deep down there's something about them that even though they scare us, even though the paranormal can make us nervous, it gives us that reassurance that somewhere out there there's something more than just this life for us. And on that note, have a safe and happy Halloween, and try to avoid the paranormal. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.